came from the mud. There's dirt on my hands. Strong like a tree. There's roots where I stand. Oh, I've been running from the law. Hope they won't shoot me down soon.
Hey, it's Justin Konikow from the Prime REC Experience here with my guest, Jas Takhar.
Thank you, buddy. Thanks for having me.
From the REC team, the Real Estate Center in...
But I think we're going to go back and forth, though, right? We're going to...
Yeah, 100%.
For this episode.
We're going to break it down.
Yeah.
It's Jas and Justin's treehouse. Like,
I like that.
we would do this if you weren't here. So, you know, I apologize if we get off track on a couple topics, but what we're going to do is we'll riff, and then we're going to do an open Q&A. So if you guys have any questions, things that you're curious about, you know, we'll bounce back and forth, whether it's for him, for myself. You know, we'll have some fun. So Jas, maybe you want to give a little bit of an introduction as to who you are for those who don't know you.
Thanks for that, Justin. I have a business partner, as I mentioned earlier. Simos is in the back. Say hi, Simos. We've been together for coming up to about 15 years, and we started REC, which stands for Real Estate Center. We have a team of 32 realtors that cover the Greater Toronto Area, essentially from Durham to Burlington, Newmarket down to the lake. Again, 15 years. We help 700 buyers, sellers, and investors every year. And I don't tell you this to impress you, more to impress upon you that we have a lot of data now. We're placed number 2 in Canada for all Royal LePage out of 18,000, our team is. And then we have 8 support staff that really help make Simos and us who we are, including our director of sales. She's walking around here, Laura Stewart. And then we have a media team that consists of a videographer, graphic designer, copywriter, and a part-time videographer, just to make sure we get as much content as we possibly can out to the marketplace on educating people on real estate, entrepreneurship, and leadership. We started off with real estate with the podcast and all the content we were doing, but after about 17, 18 episodes, I was like, how many times can you tell people that you need a home inspection or you should be speaking with a mortgage broker? All important stuff, but I wanted to add a little bit more to it. And so we started to add some entrepreneurship topics because I actually see a huge similarity between entrepreneurs and real estate purchasers, specifically investors. And I know you see it all the time as well, Justin, that it really just comes down to taking action. It's getting educated first, and then actually throwing your hat over the fence. Do you see that a lot yourself, or?
Yeah, I definitely do. I think, you know, one thing I've told to some people privately in the room, some of the people that were here speaking, was this group isn't like a real estate networking event per se, right? A lot of times you go to open networking events and it could be anybody walking in the door. You don't know if they're there to literally just sidle up next to you and try and take some of your money and go do something crazy, and they have no basis for what they're talking about. You have a lot of high-level investors in the room, people that operate businesses in different capacities that kill it at what they do. There's people in this room that I would trust with very important parts of my life that, like Sasha was saying, I might not know anything about what they do, but it's like going to a mechanic and saying, fix my brakes. I don't care what kind of brakes he uses. I want to know that my car's safe, and I want to know that I'm getting a good price, all in all. So I look at real estate investing the same way, where you spend a large portion of your career, I mean, whether you're on the brokerage side of it or the investing side, learning, right? And then you get to a point, and everybody knows about these points in their lives where you know there's another level, right? You're like, you know, you're looking at the first step, and then you're like, but how did that guy get there? Go ask him. Go talk to that person, right? And create a community around you that inspires you to kind of get to that next level. And you'll be very surprised that some of the people will look at you and say, you're putting the same effort into that one deal that you can be putting into 23 doors or this project or this land development deal, right? And I think Jas, he's being very humble, has interviewed Gary Vaynerchuk, Scott McGillivray, Ryan Serhant, some monstrous people that we have some mutual connections with, where like you reach out. I'm going to see Ryan next week to talk to him about what's happening in New York and bring that data back here. Because I think it's important to widen your network,
a lot of people
right?
think you're crazy to go to New York. Yeah. Like, what are you doing that for?
They said I'm crazy. Remember
Right,
where'd
that's
Sasha
exactly
go? Every
what
time
Sasha would say,
Sasha
right?
gets crazy.
So what made you want to go to New York and sit down with, say, Ryan Serhant? Because you're not going to be doing business in New York right now, but a lot of people would say, well, why are you flying out and spending money? But I mean, I have a feeling I know what it is. It's the same reason why we all went out and sat down with the Garys and Scott McGilvery. Scott has more of a real estate tie to it, but I mean, he's been doing this for a very long time. His business partner, Michael Saraceni, these guys have been doing it for a very long time. Success leaves clues. Like, we can see what they've done very, very well, and almost just reverse engineer what they've done well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. I'll answer the first question of why I'm going out there. There's two reasons. One is his track record. Look at the actual amount of units he sold. Jas actually gave me the initial connection last year when I met him the first time. And I went down and I chatted with him about my business, the struggles, the good, the bad. Not everything's all peaches and roses, right? Everybody struggles. And I said, here's the green, yellow, red light philosophy that I run my business by. I'll write down all the things that I do. What's green that I absolutely love doing? A lot of it is the content and information I put out there for you guys who watch all my 500 videos every single night. The yellow stuff is stuff I don't necessarily want to do, but you got to do the work to do the things that you want to do, right? There's a certain amount of work you have to do to earn the green, and then there's the red, which is the things you don't want to be doing and you should outsource. So I went over that initially with Ryan last year. He gave me a list of to-dos. We run very similar teams. You wouldn't think that in New York City and London, Ontario, but we operate Lake Erie to Lake Huron, Woodstock to Sarnia. I have a good team. We have 15 people on our team comprised of agents and media, and we have people in every market. So when people call us and need something in St. Thomas, we have somebody that is my Navy SEAL specialist in St. Thomas. We have people in Grand Bend, Woodstock, London. We have specialists everywhere. Ryan operates the exact same way with the boroughs. So he has a team of 60 that he runs in very different areas, but he laughed when I was making the comparison. I'm like, oh, we do the same business. And if you simplify it, it is, right? The last piece to that is accountability. So working with people or creating a community where if I tell Grant that I'm going to do something and the next time I see him, I didn't do it, I'm going to be embarrassed, right? So like part of that is literally just checking in with him and saying, hey man, this is what we did and this is all the amazing things that happened because of it. Here's what didn't work. What should we do next year? And then share with him what we see here because New York is a depressed market right now and we've been through that here, right?
What have you seen with all the content you're producing? Because I think it's safe to say that between myself and yourself, we probably produce the most real estate content, like really right across the country, from like a realtor and a team perspective. What are you starting to see and what made you start doing it?
One is I like being different. We had the L-Star Gala last night and it was a black tie optional. I did not wear a black suit just because I like doing things differently. And when I came into the real estate industry, I found everybody was doing the exact same thing. My old brokerage said, cold call 200 people, tell them you're in real estate, tell them do they know anybody buying to sell.
Yeah.
I did it to 2 people and they literally chirped me.
The training I got from my sales trainer, just remind me, sorry to cut you off, was don't start at the A or the Z, like start at M. So I don't know what happened there with the music, but start at M because no one makes it into the middle of the alphabet. That was the training that I received when I first got into the business. when it comes to cold calling.
I think they want you to start dancing.
Yeah. That's later on.
Okay, we're good.
That's later on.
That's after. Yeah, it's early. I brought the REC team down during the daytime because at nighttime it's a different story.
For sure.
So content. It was really, how could I be of service to my community, right? Like the founding principle of my brokerage is serving others above ourselves. That's what we founded our brokerage on. That's our North Star. And I thought, like, I'm literally going through a contract explaining to a client. They ask me something or tell me, oh, I never heard that clause explained that way, right? Like, I'll give you a really easy one, and it's residency. So there's a little clause in the agreement of purchase and sale, I think it's number 9, that stipulates that if the seller's not a Canadian resident, they have to disclose it to you, or they have to disclose it to their agent. Very important because if you buy an investment property specifically and they're not a Canadian resident and they flee the country, guess who pays their capital gains tax? The buyer. A lot of people don't know that. So it's very important to be working with professionals, especially, even if you do a private deal, make sure you're working with a lawyer that understands real estate law and you're not buying something from a non-resident and they got to pay $100,000 capital gains and they take off because they're coming after you. So, as I started doing it, I started getting messages and mandates for stuff simply because somebody heard something and said, yeah, that saved me in a negotiation. And I was like, oh, okay. I saw a little seed, and it kind of became a thing on its own where, I realized that I was connecting people in the community through the content and really trying to do it and then take myself out of it, even though it's my stupid face on it every single day.
Yeah.
I really wanted it to be a platform for the community because I think there's some pretty amazing people that I know that, now I get to expose them to our audience in various ways, such as Jas, right here, right now.
Well, I think it's important because back 15, 20 years ago when we didn't have access to the YouTubes and podcasts, the only really way to get your information out was TV and radio. Yep. And for an average person like you and I, at that time, it's very expensive, right? If there's anyone in business, small business, medium business, large business, corporation, you should really strongly consider producing content because you can get direct to consumer. And so even while I've been sitting here and in between breaks, I think I've had like 7 direct messages in Instagram just wanting to do coffees with myself, my business partner, the team, wanting to sit down with us because they know that we're actually producing content, giving all the value up front. Like we wrote a book called Real Estate Intelligence. I'm sure some people in this room already have it. It's free. We actually have a section. It's all things buying, selling, and investing. But we have a chapter that explains and teaches you how to sell your own home. And most people look at us and say, like, what are you doing? That's how you make money. But we would rather have an educated buyer, seller, or investor come to us. It just makes our job a little bit easier now because they're already educated, especially through our own educational system. Does that make sense as well?
It makes total sense. I think the industry as a whole, we're trying to change it from the inside with stuff like this because forever you think real estate agent, you think, well, all you really have is the sold data, which may have been the fact in the past, right? Like real estate used to be, I'd come to your house with a booklet and show you what's on the MLS and you can pick it and maybe I show you a property that I get more commission on, maybe I don't, right? That's a scarcity mindset. We've gone through so many iterations of technology and mark my words, in the next 2 years, you're going to be able to go online and see sold data just as quickly as I can. It is coming. It's already pretty much here. Yeah. Agents have been fighting it left, right, and center for a long time. I've been fighting for it because I actually think the consumer is more well equipped to have the same information that we do because then I don't have to go through the education process of discussing why your house is worth X. Because if you go on Zillow and you just type in your address and it pumps out a number, you don't know the metrics behind that. You don't understand that Zillow's a marketing company and they're selling you as a lead to agents. Zillow's in the business of making money off agents. So, we would rather just give all the information up front, just develop relationships, be able to go fishing with the people that we do work with, and talk about life. Let the real estate transaction be a part of it because that's just business and things will happen because of it. It's everything outside of real estate is what we find generates the actual real estate. Because then there's a level of trust. Like a lot of you in this room might not actually know me or Jas, and it's going to get to the point where you know us and know that we don't necessarily need that transaction that we're telling you to do to cover our rent, that we're going to be okay. And when you're working that dynamic, it's very different than the person that's cold calling 500 people using a script to get some, widow to sell her house way under market value and then flip that paper to somebody else. That stuff, I don't touch it. This is why I do these types of events. This is why we've delineated our brokerage to doing good, honest, ethical business in the long run.
And we have more fun doing this.
100%.
Right? Like you get to sit in front of 100 people all at once rather than have 100 separate different coffees and appointments. And after, it will be 12, 1 o'clock. We will have a drink and our team will, and we'll get to have some fun. Let's really dive into some strategies for investors and purchasers in our areas. So what are you seeing in London now? Like what type of strategies are working well for investors in your area? And I know it's just not London. You obviously do more than just London.
So I'll talk from a macro perspective, and we'll keep it really simple.
Yeah.
The best strategy would be the BRRRR method. So buying a property, renovating it, refinancing, and repeating. Yeah. It's very simple. You buy a house for, let's call it $400,000. You put $50,000 into it, and let's say it's worth $550,000. So you've literally doubled your money, right? Like every dollar you're putting in, you're getting $2 out. Now, Kim actually had a really good post this morning at 5 a.m. that I responded to in a group that we're part of together. And somebody was asking, but what if, right? What if the markets crash? And she had a great response saying, what's your exit strategy? Because that's as important as how you're going to make money. So let's play worst case scenario and let's play best case scenario. and you're going to operate in between those two, right? Like, let's aim for the unicorn, but if you're hitting singles, you're going to get to the point where you're putting numbers on the board. But if all you're doing is analyzing home runs, we're going to be having the same conversation in 3 years, right?
And just hold the mic, but so what can I get for $400,000 as an investor in London?
It's
not to
micro
put you on the
markets, right? No, it's fine. Like I can answer the question, but it's the same thing that we were talking about earlier, right? Where you tell me that there's so many micro markets in London. You can buy a 20-unit building for $850,000 right now. It's trash, and I wouldn't sell it to you because you're going to be stepping over needles and have a 35% vacancy rate, and your phone's going to be ringing nonstop, and the damage to the building is going to be insane.
Okay.
Or I can sell you a fourplex in a AAA area for $550,000 or $650,000 now. And you can have AAA tenants that work at London Life and communities in these areas. Or you could literally, there's one I'm working on right now. It's a fourplex for $1.5 million, but the rents are astronomical. This same guy is renting out another property for $5,000 a month.
Wow.
One property, right? And he actually has the track record. I've worked with him for over a decade doing this. But he works with like high-end companies that have exclusive mandates to him. So think of the 3Ms, the Ivies, the hospitals. If you're connected with that network, it's a very different ball game. So, I mean, it ranges very dramatically. Student rental-wise, the rents are going up, right? You can buy a $500,000 student rental and get, $450 to $550 a month, or you can spend some more money, have a very nice property. And there's one guy here that told me, they're seeing $800 to $900 a bedroom for rent. So, it really varies. It comes down to what do you want to accomplish, and then you'll usually have 2 or 3 options within that range.
Now, when you talk about the student housing in this area, is there a lot of property managers available? Because with student housing, that's obviously something that you want to consider, right? Because you're not going to be going to the property at 4:00 in the morning when there is Kim, she's up at 5, obviously. But at around 4:00 in the morning when there's problems between students, is that something that is readily available? Is there a lot of property managers and experienced ones? And is it to that 8 to 10% on gross monthly rent that they're charging?
Yes and no.
Okay.
So let's talk property managers to start with. What I find happens with them is new companies come up, they start working, start taking on mandates. They're really good to start. After 2 to 3 years, they start dropping off because they get overwhelmed. They're not necessarily being paid as much here as they would be in a GTA. They can't give the same quality of service. So there's a big influx of service levels that you'll see with property managers. What we found is we have a couple that we partnered with that give us discounted rates. So our property managers charge 5%. I'd say in the next couple of years, you're looking at 5 to 7 in London. Some will do it per unit. We have one property manager that does do it per unit. He's phenomenal. Student rental wise, there's a couple that, again, on the upper end, that's their entire business. They don't even publicly trade their properties. I think we might be going to see a couple this afternoon with some investors where they just do these projects. They have their formula, they have their track record, and everything's dialed in. So this guy actually runs an outfit where they've been doing student rentals for 25 years. So in the leases, the language is so detailed that, if we're all living in a house together and I scratch the couch, I'm not the one that gets the bill. We all get the bill, and then all our parents get the bill. And then all the rental guarantees are signed by the parents. So there's actually 10 people on the leases. Every T is crossed, every I is dotted, and they're just very efficient. But I just want to put an asterisk and say, be careful who you work with because they may paint that picture. But operationally, you got to be aware of who you're dealing with.
Now, we have a lot of myths about Toronto real estate.
Yes.
And what's 1 or 2 myths that you want to kind of debunk, so to speak, today about your area?
You can't find deals.
Got it.
Everybody's competing for the same deals on MLS, right? And then we bang out deals for clients and they crush it and people say, oh my gosh, I wish I would have done that. There's one deal that Prime did as an outfit that you're all familiar with if you know London. And I'll share it here. I got to share it from a high level perspective. I can't name the actual building because I realize we're being recorded and this is going live.
Yeah.
Developer bought a building for $1.5 million. We structured an 8-year lease in that building. Phenomenal rent for a growing company that you would all know. $2.3 million of construction financing. So let's call it, 3.7, let's call it $4 million with incidentals. They revalued the building at $6 million. The developer made $2 million. That's a high level deal. Same optics as the Burr method. The bank actually financed the construction, so it's better because you didn't deploy your own capital. We had about 15 people after say, why didn't you bring us that deal? And we had. The property had been on the market for 5 years, and everybody said, yo, you're crazy. Same thing. I'm just realizing what Josh just said. Every time somebody says that, take a second and take a step back and look at it from different optics. Your deal was the same thing, right? The Ridgeway was on the market for, 6 months when we went after it? Good relationship with the agent, got it well under market, and they did very well with that. So that's a myth that you can't find deals. You just got to know how to look at it. What's a myth in your market that people think about Toronto?
I think the biggest myth is you cannot get properties that are cash flowing, so where the rental income covers the expenses.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably what, and Simos, I see him nodding his head, that's probably the biggest myth and what we hear mostly from investors, and it shies them away, and it's just not true. Because there is so many properties in the Toronto, and more importantly the greater Toronto area, where the rental income will cover your expenses. Now, you're going to probably see about $100 to $150 a month, maybe even upwards to $200 a month. Toronto, in the greater Toronto area, is generally speaking not the area you want to go into and expect $1,000 to $1,200 a month. However, as we know as investors, there's more ways to win than just the cash flow. I personally believe, and where I've seen thousands of investors win in the past decade, is the fact that they're looking at long-term hold. And so as Sasha was mentioning, Toronto really, and I'm obviously biased, I truly believe it's like the sun. It's the hottest place because of actual fundamentals. The 150,000 people that are coming into the greater Toronto area year after year for the next 10 years, that's facts. We need 50,000 households every single year, and on a good year, like 2019, we're gonna end up with 24,000. And so less than half. And so just simple supply and demand. And everything from a studio, like 400 square feet in downtown Toronto, it now rents for a little less than $1,900 a month. A average one bedroom at 500 square feet rents for $2,400 a month today. And so we have a lineup. In fact, if we were to put something up for rent in the downtown area, one bedroom, you would probably have 7 to 10 qualified tenants, check in hand, first and last month, certified, in hand, ready to go. Now that 2,400 might not carry, so if we look at pre-construction, for example, something that you buy today, you hold today's value for something that's going to be built out for 3 years from now. What a lot of people do when they're working the numbers on a pre-construction unit is work out today's rent at $2,300, $2,400. Well, what you got to do is you just got to bump up the rent a little bit. We started, I think it was 8.6% rents have gone up in the Toronto area year over year. Now, we like to calculate ultra conservative, a number of, let's say, 3% year over year. That unit will cover. The income will cover all your expenses. Mortgage payment with 20% down, maintenance fees, insurance, and that insurance of like $25 a month that you need. And so, yeah, you're only seeing $100 a month, but you're seeing passive appreciation. Last number that just came out 2 weeks ago was 9.2% year over year for condos. Wow. Now, I don't actually think you should use that in your pro formas. You should be ultra conservative and go 5%. Yeah. You know what, just go half, go 4.5%. We haven't seen 4.5% in Toronto in a long time. 40 years, it's 6.8% year over year. And so you're winning on the passive appreciation, but you're also, that it's going to be rented because you have 150,000 people coming in year over year. And so you're protected from that perspective. That's probably the biggest myth. The other one is that you need a lot of capital to get into Toronto. That's actually not true as well, because if you look at a pre-construction condo, for example, it's probably one of the most passive investments. It's boring. It's like watching paint dry sometimes. But the down payment of 20%, it's paid out in installments. So it's like 5% now, 5% in 6 months. So you're at 10%. 5% a year to a year and a half. And then your last 5% is not due for like 3 years. So imagine how you can get really flexible with capital that you have, short-term mortgages. You can do other things with that money, but you don't need 140,000 right now. You can actually spread it out. And so I think by far those are the two biggest myths when it comes to the Toronto real estate market.
And to touch on that or elaborate it on a bit, there's a big difference in between I can't and I don't know how.
Yeah.
You know, when you look at what he was saying, that people stop themselves a lot saying, I can't do this and I can't do that. I mean, I always say try and challenge yourself with something that you're not very good at, and you'll find the joys in the wrinkles, right? Like going and trying a sport you've never done before, when you start realizing that it's possible, that really opens up your eyes, right? Now, I would have had the exact same thoughts about the Toronto market before I met Jas or watched them do what they've done over the past couple of years. One thing Sasha spoke about was, you know, how you'll see this trend upwards over, let's say, a 20 or 30 year period, but you get these little dips. You know, I call them micro recessions, and they're happening all the time. People keep saying, you know, when's the bubble going to pop? If you watch 12-month cycles, there's these little 2-3 month micro recessions where we will tell people not to sell their properties and wait. Or if we're watching an area and the optics aren't there yet, we'll tell them just wait. I was talking to a couple people about Oak Ridge, and there's one property specifically that we've told a seller to wait on selling, and we're probably going to list it next week because renovated properties are selling in the 550 range, which last year they were not. You know, people were buying them and renovating them, but the sales weren't actually being processed on the system. And when flippers are looking at product to purchase, they're looking at comps that have sold in the last 90 days because that's what the bank's going to look at, right? And they're saying, okay, well, now I've got 3 that have sold in the last 90 days that look like this, justifies my upside, let's rock and roll, right? But it's being able to kind of navigate that market. So I like that you came here because, like, you know, I picked my interest about Toronto because my sister lives there, and there's some optics there that I see are not changing from a macro perspective.
Well, to your point, what you don't know, right? Where in pre-construction investing, like a lot of what the strategy really there is that you have to buy like very, very early, like in the first stage of pricing. So if you were to see like any flyers at your house or signs up that it's open to the public, it's too late. The money's been made already. In fact, the builder has increased the price already maybe 3 to 4 times.
Yeah.
And so the trick and the secret when it comes to that strategy specifically is purchasing way before the public hears about it. And so, for example, like our very own Laura, she purchased her first investment property, I think like 60 days ago. The day let's give her a round of applause.
Woo! There you go.
She actually helps with the whole process within like a 10-day due diligence period. And Seamless and I just got tired of her being able to help all these people, but she didn't purchase her own, so huge congrats to you, Laura. She purchased at the earliest stage that you can on a project, and within, I think it was like 10 days, the developer increased it by $15,000, the pricing. Another 10 days, they gave another allocation out to sell, and they increased the pricing another $15,000. So her unit within a 20-day period, 30-day period, max a month, was 30 grand more. Like, that's true equity.
Let's pause for 1 second because I do want to elaborate on that. Just, you're a consumer and you don't know this, right? And you're looking at a building going up and there's 100 units for sale.
Yeah.
Right? They come online and there's already 10 units that are sold and they've increased the prices 15%. You don't know that. So you look at it and you're like, oh man, people are buying this building. I want in. They buy. And then it goes up again and then the next phase buys. And they keep selling as they're releasing the blocks. You think about the optics of confidence in a building like that. That's why it happens that way versus a builder says, hey, I'm going to build this, and the sign's up for 2 years and nothing happens. What do you think the community narrative is there? Nobody's going to buy that building.
Yeah.
Gets stigmatized, right? Which is another opportunity in another conversation, right? But
now, and we'll have investors and some in the room here as well say, well, okay, they're probably going to sell out of everything today. We as investors, we don't want them to sell out on the building that one day.
No.
Because we want them to give allocations and keep on increasing pricing. Because as investors, that's how we're going to win. That's how we're going to get our return on our investment. Now in Toronto, there's a couple of exit strategies when it comes to that same strategy where you can do what's called an assignment. So about a year before the building's actually built, you can actually flip the paper. That's kind of the street lingo for it, where it's called an assignment. And I'm going to say about 1,000 units that we've done in the last 5 years, I've yet to see an investor make less than what they've put in as their deposit. So for example, 2 years into the investment, before the building even got built, now it's like a data of 1,000 units. when they do an assignment, if they gave a deposit at that time of, call it 70K, they're gonna get their 70K back and 70K of profit. Like, it's just you don't see that anywhere. And this is not only the last 2 years I'm talking about. This is 5, 7, 8 years. A lot of people ask is, how long is this going to last? I don't really think that's the right question to ask. It's, when are you going to get into it? Because you get what I'm saying? Like, there's so many people coming into the city. It's no longer a housing shortage in Toronto, in the greater Toronto area. This is a housing crisis. Like, we need, and Sasha, who really has his finger on the pulse and his firm, they need to really figure out how they can get builders moving quickly. Like, it takes 10 years from when they put in an application for a shovel to go in the ground.
Bananas.
Manhattan does it in like 3 years, right? And so if they don't, if the government, and this is not a rant, a political rant, I don't go down that.
The black helicopters are going to crash.
We need to figure that part out, because everyone's always talking about the demand side of the equation. It really does come down to the supply.
Yeah, it takes London 25 years to do the same thing. If you look at the optics of what he was speaking about, let's go back to Uncle Jimmy, right? And opportunities. So, I bring Uncle Jimmy an opportunity of a property that's $100,000 in a risky market where these things may happen or may not happen, right? And his risk is fairly high. The things that we said were going to happen end up happening, and a year later, the same opportunity is $200,000. And we said, we understand your risk aversion. It's 200 grand. These things seem to be happening. This is what we're projecting, worst case scenario, best case scenario. We think it's going to reach 500. And he says no. And he turns it down. And then he gets to 300. And then what do you think happens to Uncle Jimmy? He gets frustrated that he didn't buy in at 100. And he starts doing his math off the 100 and the 200 he's losing. Not the 200 he could make if it does go to 500 and he bought it for 3. He's now thinking, well, I'm losing 200, even though he doesn't have a penny in the market. That's what happens 95% of the time. I did it, right? Like, people that Marty and I knew growing up bought houses that were not the smartest people on the face of the earth. They just bought houses, put all their friends in it. We spent a lot of time at those houses. We had a lot of fun. We had to replace drywall and things happened. But over time, the principal recapture, they literally is planting a seed. They're farmers. And I equate that to investing. And I love watching our clients grow and do amazing things. And I joke with them. I'm like, I should have gone in on that deal with you, because they're planting seeds. And 5 years later, if they're watering it and taking care of it and they're going back, even worst case scenario, that principal recapture is still there, right? Because if housing markets crash, guess what happens? The rental demand actually goes up.
Yeah.
Right? Things always balance out. And if the population growth continues to happen, which it historically has, it put things in a very different lens. So don't get stuck on the opportunity cost of what you didn't do, and understand it's not too late. Like, even if you're at an age now that you're like, oh, you know what, I can't imagine there's one guy in this room that's done amazing things in 3 years. I can't get to that level. He did it in like 3-4 years, right? You have time. That's definitely something that you need to be aware of. You just got to get around people that'll help you level up.
And acting quickly doesn't mean acting stupidly. Like, you got to make sure that you're buying in the right location.
Yep.
And you want to make sure that the numbers obviously make sense. And again, going back to pre-construction really quickly, just because a building's going up in an area, that doesn't mean that you should buy into that area. Like, we like to stick around transit, because we know, if you look at world real estate, values go up most around transit, and the rentability of a unit or a home or any type of real estate is best around transit. And then you want to look at the builder. Like, we don't want to be the guinea pig. Like, is this their first time at the rodeo? And so what fit and finishes have they done in previous buildings? What's their reputation? There's some changes that are coming around Terry on home warranty, but we can look back and see what type of complaints have been put in about the builder, and then what incentives are in place for you as an investor. So, for example, you want to make sure you have that ability to assign, because financial hardship can come up. Things come up. It's not only used for the assignment clause should not only be used and have in the contract just to flip it. We need to make sure that if you cannot close on the unit that we can get out at some point. And then there's a certain occupancy and registration period that we need to have these incentives in place. So going back to what I said earlier, like sometimes you don't know what you don't know, but you want to build that all-star team around you. And it doesn't need to be us, but make sure that you're building a team around you. And as Sasha mentioned, in fact, I've never heard him really say it, but he articulated it really well. Like, do the due diligence on the team, on the people. And don't be afraid to tie up a property and then do the due diligence on the property.
Yeah.
I see so many people, in fact, we're in contract with someone right now, and I should say we're in contract because this is the problem. He has not signed the actual contract, and after we're done right now on our way back to Toronto, he's gonna lose this unit. The builder's gonna take back the unit because he's had the contract in his inbox for 48 hours or something. And he should have signed this like 4 days ago. And so the builder's gonna take back this unit, and what he's been doing is not signing it because he wants his lawyer to review it. But you can sign it and then have your lawyer review it. The conditions are in place. And so if there's any tip I can leave an investor with is tie up properties like it's going out of style. Just make sure that in the Schedule A there's a condition that says conditional upon my builder's approval, on my lawyer's approval, conditional upon financing. Have something in there that allows you to get out of the deal, and it's not a firm deal, but go nuts, go crazy, tie up properties, put in offers. That's what you should do. It's good practice, and you never know what's going to come out of a deal like that.
The lawyer review condition is the mother of all parachutes. Lawyers love to kill deals. That's what they're in the business of killing deals.
Yeah.
So be aware of that as well, right? Like when we're communicating with lawyers, and we work very closely with quite a few amazing ones, their job is to make sure you have zero risk. Guess what comes along with buying real estate? Risk, right? And they'll be very clear with you. If you have a good relationship with one, they should be able to talk to you like a friend and say, this is like what I see. And then you should be able to turn to me and say, this is what I see, and have a level of understanding of who you're working with and doing your due diligence on the people that are giving you advice and what their end game is, right? Because people will sign things not understanding what they're signing. Ask a question. We see these contracts every day because that's the business we're in. If I look at my mechanic and he's hitting my brakes with a banana, I might ask him a question because it doesn't look like what he should be doing, right? Mm-hmm. If you read a clause and you don't understand what that clause means, work with somebody who can explain it in detail, and give you the understanding that, your deposit is safe. Because I mean, you're signing a contract. A lot of people, that's their biggest concern is that $5,000 or $10,000 deposit. What's going to happen with it? And if they structured things properly and they were transparent through the process with the other people involved, you are protected and you can breathe. But I promise you, you will keep losing deals if you just look at analysis. And another quick tip that I'm going to leave you guys with is if you're just running your numbers based on what you see online, have fun. Go invest in Nova Scotia or certain markets where you're not going to see any passive appreciation because you're looking at it the same way everybody else is looking at it. You have to understand what is the potential of what you're purchasing. I love the fact that he breaks down understanding what the rental increases are, right? Because I wouldn't have even thought about that. I would have ran my numbers on Toronto properties based on the rental amounts that are going on right now. But you have historical data that says this is what it's been, so let's chop that in half and still be conservative and go back to point A. The residential vacancy turnover rate for properties in London is about 16%. So you can bank on that if I run it at 8, that 8% of your tenants will leave every year, year over year. That doesn't mean one's going to leave every single year. If you have 2 tenants, it might take 4 or 5 years to get there. What's your exit strategy to take that unit, renovate it, and then get the value up? Mm-hmm. Can your real estate agent negotiate a buyout by treating that tenant like a human being and showing up with a $5,000 check that might change somebody's life? We deal with tenants all the time where we do buyouts. We give them that base, tell them to save, get them in touch with good people that show them how to create wealth, and then they come back in 5 years and buy a house with us. Mitch just dealt with one that we actually took to tribunal, and he still wanted to buy a house with us, right? There's ways of doing business where you understand the risk and the reward of what you're purchasing. It's not all on your shoulders, I think is what I'm trying to say, right? Awesome. Like you need to build a group of people that you trust and use this room. Like I'm a talking head. I'm wearing a tie. If you don't know me, like I look like I'm trying to sell you something. Talk to the people that are in this room that have done it themselves too and just see what works. And what works for her might not work for you, might not work for him. It's just, you got to carve your own path, but there's so many different ways to do it. And it's the joy of what we get to do. Before we wrap up, I'm going to flip it to you because you have been obsessed with media. You're probably one of the best interviewers that I've seen go from zero to hero in no time. So give me a little synopsis as to what you're doing on the media side of things and where that inspiration comes from.
Well, I have no clue what I'm doing on the media side, to be honest with you. No, we had a radio show on News Talk 1010 and AM 640. See, it was for how long? 5 years, 7 years? 7 years. Back, I guess we started in 2010 or something like that. Both first on News Talk 1010 and then AM 640. And we realized really quickly how many doors that started to open up for us, and the connections and the relationships. It was never done for like someone listening and giving us a call and saying, okay, I'm ready to buy my house, or I'm ready to sell a house. It really, we were smart enough to know that's not how that's gonna play out. And then after we decided not to do the radio show anymore because it just became expensive, we said, look, what's some new mediums and platforms that we can take advantage of? And podcasts kind of came out, and I looked over to my partner and said, look, I have a feeling we can be good at this because, I'm always on the phone. It's what I do. I don't have a computer. I don't use a laptop. I don't have a desktop. Everything's done from this guy right here, and I'm on calls all the time. It's what I've always done my whole life. I think I'm going to be okay. I actually think I have a pretty sexy voice, but I mean, that's up to you guys to decide. But I really enjoy speaking with people and finding out what worked well for them, and more importantly, what didn't work well for them. And then we said, look, let's tape it and let others start to become flies on the wall of conversations we're having. And it's just starting to kind of take a life of its own now, where we can do one podcast and we'll rip, I don't know, like 18, 20 little pieces of content from video. I saw Steven walking up to me when he heard me speak about something specific about assignments. He'll go back to the office on Monday and rip that little piece about assignments out, and we'll push it out to the marketplace. There's no secret that we're trying to hold back anymore when it comes to our business. It comes to like real estate investing and even like our business for other realtors to look at. Because we think the pie's big enough, we can all eat. And as a late partner of ours used to say, if we run out of pies, we'll just bake more. We'll figure it out. And we really kind of have that philosophy.
And I think that's a great way to wrap it up, that, it is baking the pies that's fun. I joked that I would have done this for free when we sat down. You
are doing it for free.
Basically I am doing it for free. But my wife's an incredible woman, and she allows me she gives me the freedom to do what I enjoy doing, right? Like, I like spending time with people. One of my favorite things, and I sent this to some of the people I sent the invites to in the video email, was in a real estate transaction, I get to spend time with my friends closer than some of their family members, more often than some of their family members, for quite a short period of time sometimes, and quite a long period of time other times. Life gets busy, people go back into their daily grind and everything else, and like everything else, time flies. Really being able to come back to this, on a regular basis is something that I enjoy. And I do it because I get inspired to go out and do different things, right? Like, I'm as thankful for getting this group together as anybody is here for having been here and hearing what Jas and Sasha had to say. So, we will keep this network tied in. We'll send you guys all the updates, all the footage. We've given a platform if there is, any interest in you guys going into the Facebook group, and we'll send that link as well. You guys can communicate and connect with other investors and people there.
What's the Facebook?
I think it's Prime Real Estate Experience. I'll send out all the links.
Awesome.
We're pretty casual about all this stuff too. Like, we'll keep the email chain going because that's probably the easiest way to update you guys. Jas and I are already talking about doing some crazy stuff next year. Tapping into our network, because we have some pretty incredible people that are all over North America that have already expressed interest in coming down and really networking and speaking in different capacities to you guys. So, I want to thank you all from the bottom of my heart for being here. We're going to open up for Q&A in a second. But Jas, just thank you for taking the team down and coming down to little old London.
I appreciate you. I'll take that.